Hello and welcome to another panel discussion hosted by Grow Opportunity in collaboration with the Cannabis Council of Canada. My name is Marilyn de Guzman and I will be the moderator. Thank you for joining us. Today's session, titled Data Domain and Analyzing Cannabis Sales and Marketing Trends Through Business Insights, is sponsored by the Canadian Cannabis Exchange and DCM Enterprise Business Solutions. I'm excited to introduce our excellent set of panelists in today's discussion, but before I do that, just some housekeeping reminders. The audience will be in listen-only mode. However, you'll be able to post your questions to any or all of our speakers on the question box in your webinar user panel. You may post your question at any time during this hour-long discussion, and I will do my best to get to as many questions as possible. Today's webinar will be recorded, and all attendees will receive a link to access the recording. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. First up is Shelly Anwyll. She's the Senior Vice President of North America Emerging Markets and leads the market sector strategy and oversight for DCM Enterprise Business Solutions. Welcome, Shelly.
Thank you.
Next up is Leif Undseth, is the Vice President of Operations at the Canadian Cannabis Exchange. He's working closely with licensed cannabis and hemp companies across Canada. Welcome, Leif.
Looking forward to the discussion today. Thanks for having us.
All right, and last but not least is Alexandre Voyer, is the owner of Weed Crawler, which provides data related to the sales of cannabis products in the province of Quebec. Bonjour, Alexandre.
Bonjour, thanks for having me.
Right, so thanks again for joining us and sharing your insights and expertise in today's discussion. So to start off the discussion, I think let's go around the table. If everybody could provide an overview of your respective backgrounds and your role at your organizations and any new initiatives you're working on pertaining to the cannabis market. Let's start with you, Cheryl. Shelly. Sorry.
Yeah, you can call me anything. Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm our Senior Vice President for North American Emerging Markets at DCM. My background really spans in the marketing agency and marketing services, where I've spent several years supporting the CPG and retail area. At DCM specifically, we're a communication solution organization, and we really focus on leveraging our tech-enabled solutions that help and support with workflow, automation, content, complex communication, branding, and regulatory requirements. We work in several verticals: financial services, retail, and healthcare specifically. And we've got long-term tenured relationships with all the tier 1 leading organizations in those verticals. And that was foundational when we really took the approach to invest and get involved in the cannabis industry. So if I go back a couple years, in the spring of 2018, when the legislation was beginning to drop, we really looked at what the requirements were and, is there a solution that DCM could bring to the industry? And we focused in on developing a digital platform that solved for the regulatory requirements, the brand versioning, and the entire end-to-end workflow, leveraging a digital platform for label and packaging. And so that's the area that we really have formulated our business. We have probably about 70% of the market here in Canada. We work with the top leading licensed producers, with processors, and with retailers, and some new initiatives that we're working on. Sustainability, that's a pretty apparent theme in today's environment, and so we are exploring different alternatives and substrates and options that are available in that area. We're making further investments in digital capabilities, and it's really being driven by the evolution of the industry and how, the speed to market and the complexity of the supply chain, and how can we automate in order to simplify and just make things work better for our clients. And then we're also expanding into the US, so really taking what we've solved for here in Canada and targeting some of the licensed states and the multi-state operators, and leveraging what we know and how we perform here and how that can help address the US market.
Sounds great. Leif?
Yeah, absolutely. Background was mostly in the commodity sectors, but where that merged with cannabis to form the Cannabis Exchange was our co-founders actually starting their own LP, noticing that there was no standard way to transact, no standard way to contact the market, and more importantly, no standardization around pricing or data. So what we brought together is the full ecosystem on the commercial process for LPs, all the way from genetic to final package for consumers, meaning you could transact clones, flowers, extracts, all in a standard way, meaning we took a time to put together the IP that forms the standard buy sell agreements, the escrow process to handle the funds to protect both parties, and the shipping companies to move the product. But then also flipping over, taking the data from all of those transactions, all of the listings, all of the product moves, and tying that to terpene quality, cure method, potency, and also which SKUs are selling in the market. So we bring that entire ecosystem together for our clients, and we work with LPs both operating and pre-licensed so that groups can hit the ground running once they are in their facility and operating.
Great. That's Alexandra.
Yes. So while I'm a bit of the odd duck here, I'm a newcomer in the cannabis business. Usually in my other job, I'm a database administrator. And what brought me here on this panel is I started gathering the cannabis sales metric for Quebec, specifically starting in 2019. So I have more than a year of data as of today. What I'm doing with this service, I'm both satisfying the LP side of the market as well as the buyers who go in the shop. So I have a tool that called SQDC Plus, where people can come in and have an overview of what's available in the multiple locations across Quebec, the 68 location as of today. Also have a look at the new products coming in, the availability online and in store of those products. But I'm also helping LPs or other types of clients getting a bit of a pulse about the status of the market in Quebec, seeing their competitor, where they're standing. If you're a new product, you're willing to go to market, what price point do you put? What type of competitors are you facing? What volumes are stores selling? So it's a bit of a luck of the draw on my side, because SQDC doesn't provide that much information to the market as of now. So I'm filling that void and helping those clients of mine, mostly LPs, with this insight or just new trends I'm seeing, and providing them with that type of information, as well as structured or customized reporting tools for them to play with. What's coming on for me, at least, is kind of trying to replicate that service in other provinces and also in the United States, with the emergence of cannabis over there. There is some interest, so I'm trying to get some. I'm in talks with different parties to get some association there to get that going and growing the business. So that's pretty much it for me.
Right. So since our topic today is all about data and data trends, and across industries, it has become, the data that each company holds, it holds a lot of keys for business development, right? Can you talk about in the cannabis industry, as a relatively young industry, what you're seeing in your respective areas or communities in terms of the capabilities or lack thereof in the cannabis industry to collect and take advantage of the significant amounts of data that's becoming available throughout the value chain, and why is this important for the growth of the industry? Let's start with you, Leaf.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we came into the market, we found that producers were pricing based on what they had put into their investor decks and told everyone they were going to price their dollar at. There was no agreement around what a product would sell at. People were selling it in the market at a lost leader price. So there was really just this forming of transparency and tying the price per gram at the business to business level to the price per gram at the consumer level. So I'm sure Alexandre will speak a little bit more to that and how he's tied that together in Quebec, but we're finally seeing a little bit emerging with the CPG space, meaning that consumers know what they're going to buy at the 24% THC range. They know what to expect out of that half-gram jar. That means that the LP now knows what they can go and spend in the B2B market to pick up quality flower. So with that, though, we've also seen a collapse of pricing in some areas, meaning the distillates, the isolates have become commoditized. A lot of groups can produce them now. There's a lot of equipment that can produce those products in the market, driving down the price, your standard supply-demand relationship. So this is something that we've really been able to trend in our end of month report that we issue to all exchange members, and showing those trends over the last year. When we move on to the trim category, the input for things such as the distillates and isolates, it flows back upstream, meaning when distillate prices compress, people have to get trim for cheaper. So we've seen trim go from $1.50 to almost 10 cents a gram in some cases, really changing the way that groups not only collect trim, the way that they handle it and treat it. It's become a lot less important for groups. So to tie it all together, it's really changed the business model for some groups. It's changed how they handle products. It's changed the phenotyping for genetics. And more specifically, it's changed the business model. High quality micro product is now leading the market and is our most traded category, because that is the most profitable margin category. That's where a lot of the greenhouses, they've had to just back off on the number of strains that they produce and focus on one core strain to really be good at that one strain. So with the price evolution, we've seen a huge adaptation in the business models. But further to that is why these panels are so important, is bringing together the data from the value chain. We all as panelists have this great information, but we really need to start merging it so someone can come and see from seed to consumer's hands every part of the data value chain. So on a high level, that'd be my commentary, and we can all obviously dive into more client by client based on what part of the value chain they're in.
Right. And speaking about value chain, Shelly, can you talk about from your perspective in terms of from your business model around this?
Yeah, sure. So it's interesting. And, just to build on what Leif was saying, so we're more transactional data. So, you can get your big data from seed to sale and point of sale, shipment data, and third-party analytics. And that's really important for predictive modeling, innovation, product development, and a deeper understanding of consumer insights. Where we play is, and if you think about it, we're managing all of the content that goes on the labels or packaging that then makes it out to the marketplace. And when I've got more than 70% of the market, you begin to aggregate the data. And so I can start to see and understand order patterns. This is a high skew, small run, short run business and industry right now. And so you can see the variance that has occurred over the past 3 years, what has evolved throughout COVID, and where the value that we can offer our client base is really sort of that incremental upstream in helping them to understand how can they become more efficient and more effective in running their product and running their different lines. How do we help them? Because the core theme, which I think is going to be another question, is all around reducing cost of goods sold, right? Like that's a pretty consistent theme in the conversations that I'm having. And so this data really helps to bring that forward to help them prioritize where they could be doing that, but also do some peer set comparisons to see how they are running and performing against their peer sets. And again, what are areas that they want to focus and really try to drive their priorities.
Right, and Alexandra, I guess your data comes from sort of the consumer side of things and consumer behavior. Can you talk about some of the trends that you're seeing there?
Yeah, good question. So from my perspective on the Quebec side, like I said in my introduction, things are very opaque. So for the LPs or for people who are willing to enter the Quebec market, or people who are already in the existing Quebec market, sometimes it's hard. I could totally see the trend at the beginning of the legalization, where it was a bit all over the place, kind of throwing everything at the wall and see what sticks type of approach, because it was really hard to see what was going on. And as year progress, you can see that the trends, that the clientele becomes pickier, which is one thing, and also I have a feeling that LPs are trying to get a sense of what works and what doesn't work, whether it's in packaging related to what Shelly does, or it's with the strains like Leaf, with the micro, like the very niche strains that are hard to find. You see that there's an appetite for that. For sure, I think everyone on the panel will agree that high THC and low price is still a winning combination. I think there's other factors that are coming to play that are interesting to watch for sure. One of the things that we saw in my province, because we don't have the edibles, we don't have the vapes, we're really constricted to the flowers, hashish, oils, and beverages. One thing I do see is there was a clear separation for the clientele between high volume project with okay quality but high THC, and something more of a microbrewery with really consistent releases, maybe smaller batches, but something that you could see. And also as far as the packaging goes, there's also, I know you guys are limited by what Health Canada is telling you to do, but there are some ways to play with the packaging and add more information, which can give you some pretty rewarding results when it comes to the terpene or like to the curing time, things like that, that the consumer will react to and associate with the higher end product. So it's something like trends like that I've been witnessing. Yeah.
So is that something that you're seeing in terms of Alexandre, with consumer responding to a specific product based on packaging and
Exactly. Yeah, packaging is definitely important, and the information that's on the package. I feel that, I don't know, I'm not an LP, so it's hard for me to say, but I feel at first maybe people were more conservative with what they would show on the packaging. They kind of stick to the original plan, THC, CBD. Okay, let's package date. That's it. Nowadays, there's more options, or they seem to be more options as far as being more precise with what you're doing and kind of showing the consumer that you took the time to do a proper curing. You took the time, like here's the step we took. Here's the terpene percentage we have, and here's what it is. Not just, and it makes it easier for the consumer to make a proper decision about what they're gonna buy. Yeah.
right. That's really been a trend in terms of addressing what the regulations say and being creative with your
Yes.
storytelling and
Very
those
much.
types
Yeah.
of things.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, Shelley. So maybe, that's one. Speaking of challenges, right? Can you talk about, and maybe Leaf, you can chime in as well. From your conversations with cannabis organizations, what are some of the biggest areas of concern, and what insights are they looking for from the data trends?
Yeah, sure. So, in the conversations that I have with my clients, their biggest concerns is reducing cost of goods, right? Everybody needs to be profitable. Some are, lots are really trying to drive to profitability. So that's a critical one. And when I'm working with supply chain and operations, they carry a lot of that burden, like they carry a lot of the costs in the organization. Everybody's looking to improve efficiencies. There's this constant rush to speed to market. And so you got to get there quick. And then, it's the balancing act with the regulatory requirements and the compliance. And it certainly offers and presents its challenges. So those would be some of the concern areas that I would be having conversations with. And so, where our data can add value is really helping organizations to understand what they're doing today. And, when I think about packaging and labeling, trying to harmonize some of those elements across like segments or like formats. So instead of having something different for everything, really try to harmonize it a bit better in order to drive some efficiencies, because there's a whole cascade of workflow that needs to occur when a label arrives at a processor and where it goes from there. So I think that's an area that the data can really provide some improvement on. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. And Leaf, anything to add to that in terms of what you're hearing from Canada's organizations about, biggest areas of concerns and how the data is sort of, addressing those concerns or providing them insights?
Yeah, so if we segment it into sales license companies, the ones dealing with the provincial boards in the trenches, and then the, let's just say, cultivation and processing sites who are doing that on contract for the sales license companies as a route to market. Starting with the sales license companies, it's of course cost. They want to be able to get good product at the best cost possible, but however, micro producers are kind of learning what their product's worth. So we're almost seeing this need to open the communication up, and we've had these chats with our producers where they say, hey, you made a fantastic product, but at $4.50 a gram, here's my packaging cost. I don't make margin because the province has set my price already with my SKU. So communication has become a big thing, not just driving costs down, but explaining why they're driving costs down. Saying if I can get to $3 a gram, I don't have to buy 20 kilos from you, I can buy 100 kilos from you. So that explanation of margin upstream, just realizing that some growers who aren't on the front lines with the provincial bodies aren't understanding. So communicating the costs when they're trying to reduce them. But further to that, also just high turnover. Products are changing quick, everyone's changing phenos. It takes a lot to set up a new product. It is time with your team setting up a SKU. It is time with new branding, new colors of packaging. So groups want to know that when you're giving them strain A, you're going to keep producing strain A at a quality standard because there's startup costs associated with every new SKU. So the easier you can make it for these sales license companies in terms of bouncing between different phenos will also in general help drive costs down. So there's a lot to unravel there, but there is this dynamic relationship evolving between those sitting behind the sales license companies and the ones that Shelly's dealing with on the front lines who are saying driving costs down. It's about, okay, how can we help them get to a cost margin where we sell more cannabis? So that would be the biggest commentary that I have on the communication in the industry around costs.
Right. Alexandre, down the value chain with the consumer, and talking about price points, like, is that something that you're seeing? What are the trends in terms of cannabis consumption that you're seeing, that insights? Like, is price really like, the number one um,
Yeah,
buying
it's
decision? What are you seeing?
yeah, it's a great question, and like it's an exercise I also do on my end of the spectrum, I guess, with the LPs that I onboard, because there are LPs who are not yet in the market. They have this product and they're like, how do I price this? Like the price keep changing, the market keeps, there's new trends. So what I've noticed mostly is at first there was not a fight to the bottom, but there was like a ITHC low pricing at all costs. Let's do this, and people just went out of their way to kind of reduce the price. And in Quebec, it's even worse because we have some of the lowest prices when we compare to other provinces. So it was becoming almost like really hard for smaller LPs to kind of make their way in because they're like, man, I'm competing for like less than $3, like very low amount per gram. Like it was not viable solution for them. So the way that there was kind of almost like a cut where you have, I like to compare it with like beverages. Like you have these beverages like in beers, like you have the normal beers that from the big brands that will sell at a lower cost, sure, because they have a like bigger volume, but then you have all these microbreweries. So we have all these micro growers that are coming and they are seeing opportunities in the sense that while in Quebec, you cannot market per se that you're a micro grower, and you have those challenges because we have a Quebec law prohibiting the promotion of cannabis. There's a way to make your presence known, whether it's on Instagram, like just showing your crop, showing that you're a smaller person, so that when you enter market and people do research your products, they're seeing that it's made in smaller batches, and that pays for the fact that they can ramp up their price and then be more of a niche products and things like that. So it's kind of like when I say it's cutting in two ways, it's cutting like in those micro formats are becoming more and more present in the market. And we're seeing also the renaming of SKUs. So we're talking about SKUs earlier, and I'm thinking about certain LPs that kind of went at first when the legalization came out, they had all these funky names for their brand and their thing, and you kind of lose the consumer as you're building your SKUs, and you have all these weird names. Then people don't know the strain it is anymore, and then they get confused, and then what's going on with this? So I've seen a lot of LPs going back on this and renaming their products to the actual strain of the product, keeping it simple, doing your job. Is it like so the consumer has in their face what it is. Am I looking for this or not? There's also been the switch to more of a bag approach compared to a plastic containers. There's been that shift. I've noticed that's not like back from data, but I've noticed that maybe they're trying because it's easier to keep the humidity in those type of packaging. Like there's been a shift from these huge plastic containers, and in Quebec the huge containers are irrelevant because you don't see them on the behind the countertop. It's very hidden, so you don't care that it's like a meter wide, the box or whatever. You just need the product and you hand it off to the consumer. So there's been that, and one of the interesting approach, and I'd be curious if Shelly has seen this also, is we're seeing a bit of the influence from the legacy market as far as packaging, like the tuna cans are becoming a thing. Like all of these new ways of packaging are showing within the standards of Health Canada, obviously, and the province. We're seeing all of these new ways of kind of differentiate your product to other products and other brands, and less of those white packaging, very medicinal, very medical type of approach, more of a embracing the recreational market and kind of going with that for the consumer. Yeah.
Right. Shelly, do you have some insights on that too, like that type of packaging trend?
Yeah, I think for sure, like the jars are definitely going away and being replaced with pouches. And so again, it's so you're dealing with the efficacy of the product inside those containers, right? So how do I know that when I tested this and I packaged it and the THC value was X, that when the consumer actually then inhales or uses the product, that THC is still at that efficacy level? So there's this ongoing balance and priorities of making sure it's all right, and then meeting the compliance that still exists today with Health Canada. So we are seeing some transition away from jars. Like that's a sustainability theme, that's a cost saving theme, that's a product efficacy theme. And yeah, I think it's really entertaining to see how the illicit market is making some influences in how the packaging, and I was just on a call earlier today saying like we need to do a broad spectrum, and the illicit market is a contributing factor in that conversation.
Right.
Well, just on
Before,
packaging, sorry, I was just gonna say packaging materials. We've even seen the used market for packaging materials picking up because people are changing their strategy halfway through. They've ordered hundreds of thousands of jars, and they are not scared to change their ideas halfway through, which has opened up a category for a lot of producers to get cheap packaging. But that's just a comment I'd say in our packaging section that we offer on the exchanges. These producers who had a ton of jars, like I want to get rid of them. I'm changing. And then pivoting halfway through their run of that packaging.
Yeah, how companies went to market in 2018 and how they're evolving for those that were there then and new license holders who are coming in, like in such a short period of time, there has been such an evolution and change that it's really quite remarkable.
We've seen groups with the Vitalis Q90 systems. They were going to be an extractor. Suddenly they're selling that equipment. So it's pretty crazy to see, but it's almost good to see groups specialize in what they're good at and opens the door for those other groups to come pick up some of that equipment at cost, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Certainly shows the agility of this industry, right? Let's just being able to adapt to whatever the trend is. Before I move on to the next question, I just wanted to remind our audience as well, again, that questions can be posted on the question box. So if you have any question to our audience, feel free to ask them. Leaf, I have a question for you. Can you talk about some of the most actively traded type of product in the cannabis exchange platform and what you're seeing emerging as having a huge potential to dominate or to be a significant player in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. Flower is far and beyond the most traded. It's where everything starts. I mean, you could say genetics is where it starts, but everyone brings that in on their declaration, and there's such quality nurseries out there. So the flower is really where it all starts. Everyone's always going to want a 3.5 gram jar of flower to really get the trichomes and really understand what that strain profile is doing. You can take it down to a pre-roll from there. You can take it out to an extract. And while everyone's been saying the concentrate market's going to be the big next thing, I think there's some challenges with consumer education consumers understanding what these hash and shatter products are and how to use them. So where my focus in the next thing I believe is going to be impactful is even further edible innovation. We saw gummies, chocolates, drinks, all these things that we knew were going to hit the 2.0 market, but now we're seeing mints, we're seeing more of the topicals, we're seeing the bath bombs, really different ways to consume, and that's where it's leading the market. And that's what's drawing on the distillate inventories. That's what's drawing on the full spectrum oil inventories. So that's having the most shockwave throughout the value chain, I'd say, is this just constant innovation, seeing how a consumer can use and take this product. And again, the legacy market's impacting that. We're seeing groups like Nextleaf buying up legacy brands and their legacy formulations. So innovation in the edible space, in short, would be where I see a lot of this going, and then rippling out through the value chain from there.
Right. We have a question. Speaking of questions, we have a question here. How can we utilize the data insights to drive forward more sustainable packaging? Shelly, want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, so the sustainable packaging, I think there's a lot of insights in terms of, you know, how people are approaching their packaging and what they want to achieve with it, and then what's going on in the marketplace, and then the sustainability around corporate, their corporate lens and their corporate governance. And so what we're finding with sustainability is there's a high cost that's associated in the investment for sustainable elements. And so, you know, again, organizations need to balance, you know, the importance of sustainability against the cost to serve. And then there's that child resistant component. And so with sustainability, can a child resistant zipper or closure be recycled or compostable? And so there's still a lot of research and development and testing that's underway. And I think all of that leads into what are those insights? What are we learning from that? And what are some of the ideal alternatives that organizations can consider across their whole brand portfolio, not just one area, but, you know, all of the different brands and product mix that they have.
Alexandra, are you seeing that as a sort of a consumer behavior trend where products that are promoted as more sustainable gaining more traction than, you know, the others? Like, what are you seeing?
Yeah, good question. So to be honest, one of the issue with Quebec again goes back to the law against promotion of cannabis, which is kind of double-edged sword in the fact that cannabis, like LPs cannot say out loud like, hey, we have this new sustainable thing, where it would kind of go against, which is kind of odd in a sense. The SQDC does take some responsibility into being or trying to be eco-sensitive in the sense that they have like a recycling bins in place for like the plastic jar or the glass jars to be honest, from my side, I haven't seen a lot of spikes I've seen spikes regarding the new type of packaging when a SKU changed from one package to another. For example, when EXO changed all of their packaging from these like plastic container to more bags, you could see that the sales did increase to some degree. Like there was some need from the market. Like people were excited about that change. It was easy to tell by the numbers. But unfortunately, other than that, it hasn't been such a big conversation piece in Quebec, unfortunately. I'm hoping that the LP do take this over and kind of there's a way for them to promote like what they're achieving, right, in the future for them. It's definitely a struggle for the LPs here in Quebec.
Right. Another question here, this one's for Leaf. Do you need it to be an LP to list products on the cannabis exchange for sale?
Yes, so when our sign-up process is implemented for a client, it's our standard client agreement and a Health Canada license. That ensures everything on the exchange is absolutely compliant with Health Canada regulations. And then every deal, once transacted, the QAs are introduced for all COC documentation. So we follow every Health Canada guideline to the letter. But what I will say is groups who are pre-licensed, say in the security or evidence package submission stage, are able to still register with the exchange just with a view-only account. This is how we get groups up to speed on what's going on in the market, how to price their products when they come to market, and also partner them up with sales license companies even before they've started getting going in some cases. So there are view accounts to groups who aren't licensed, but I will say every product on our site is completely compliant and from a licensed producer.
Makes sense. And then this one is for you as well, Leaf. One of the attendees wants to know what's going on with hemp, any trends there, and any OTC transactions.
Yeah, so the hemp market really, as everyone knows, overproduced. And then we saw almost a shrink back, but then we saw production again. So groups are still figuring out where the right spot is for volumes, but we also see such a variation. We have hemp all the way from 3% CBD up to 11%. And what that opens up is not only a massive range on cost, but also partnerships. Then the reason for that is when an extractor finds a good group who produces clean hemp with a high CBD and it yields well in their extraction run, they're not really going to deviate and go shop in the market month over month. So we found a lot of our extractors and our hemp producers that we've done deals for, we're doing more joint venture deals. We're doing long-term deals with a callable option where they'll say, send me 3,000 every 2 months, send me 1,000 on this month, my sales didn't go as well. So we're seeing much more of a partnership. It's not much as a shop around market in the flower space, but that doesn't mean an incumbent can't get in and still find a home for their hemp. You just have to be able to market your product, store it cleanly, and have sample bags ready to send out for a group to run and test their extraction. So there's a lot of things you can do to really make your hemp stand out, but be aware there is a lot on the market. So you are going to have to be ready to come to the table to negotiate and find that happy place, just because we are seeing such a supply on the market right now.
Right. Is that so? I guess with developments in hemp, Leaf, what are you seeing in terms of potential to really, because in the past couple of years they've really, I know they've done some regulatory amendments, changes to promote more advancements for hemp development, right?
Yeah.
So what are you seeing in terms of the potential for that, and is that something that's coming soon, or are there some barriers still for that?
So the approval of new cultivars, the new cultivar list is really going to help with the actual CBD flower that's coming off, the milled biomass from that hemp. But the whole plant, absolutely. Even in Alberta here, we're seeing a lot of innovation and investment into the herd manufacturing, the textile manufacturing. For example, back in October, we were working with a group out of Turkey to make textiles out of the hemp. So people are, for years now, have known the hemp plant can be used for everything from concrete to packaging materials. We're finally seeing that at a commercial scale. So when we move away from just the milled CBD biomass, we're seeing actual, hey, I need 1 ton of product used, not just an R&D case, which is exciting. But again, groups need to know how to handle their product properly, store it properly, because we see so much sampling that we were sending to this group in Turkey that was just unusable because groups still had a long way to go in the education of how do I store it and how do I run it properly for these groups to use it in their materials like packaging. So in summary, education, learning, trial and error, there's still some of that going on, but I do see a lot of this new harvest season picking up on the learnings from the prior years more than ever.
Right. I want to go to Shelly and ask her about some marketing strategy. So, as a quickly revolving industry, how can cannabis companies manage these changing trends and balance branding and marketing strategies with regulatory compliance?
Yeah, I think, compliance is such a big hurdle, and we've touched on that already. And I've also touched on, balancing cost and speed to market. And then the other thing to consider is just the complexity across the provincial and territory jurisdictions. So the route to market for these products is also not as simple or streamlined as other industries. And so I think, what we're seeing are ways that you could really evolve in this area from a packaging perspective. This is where we're seeing design to value. So really trying to drive bottom line impact by reinvesting in brand equity and conserving value for where it matters most. And I think that's a trend and an evolution that we're starting to see, and that will continue from the consumer. I think we're already seeing that brands are taking more of a consumer-centric, data-driven approach. We're seeing that with the innovation of products that we've already touched on that. And so we're beginning to see some segmentation. So I feel that trend is going to continue to evolve. And then from a retail perspective, I think a really good example of how that's evolving is how OCS recently gave craft a designation. And so, you know, really helping to support that whole craft community and those smaller producers. I think that's a trend that plays into that whole marketing strategy and just helps to really start to refine some of the activity that's going on.
Right,
Well, and
that's
that
an
marketing's, oh, sorry to
ahead.
cut you off. I was just going to say the marketing strategy starts with the micro growers. We have so many micro growers that will come and say, hey, I have a 25% plus product. It's like, okay, that's awesome. How are you trimming it? How are you curing it? What does the bud look like? What's the density? That's what allows our sales license companies to go to the OCS and pitch them to that category. So that would be my biggest message is take advantage of this craft designation as a marketing channel, starting at the micro cultivator. You might not be the one selling to the province, but your info is getting sold to the province. So come prepared with that package as if you were marketing your own product.
So, Leaf, with the micro growers, are you seeing when you're in the exchange platform, I guess, what are some of the potential opportunities for micro growers that you're seeing that they can, you know, explore as a business?
Route to market, not just bouncing around group to group, hunting for a sale every month. If you make a quality product, I have LPs on the market who will buy it up and are willing to buy the next 10 to 12 months of your production. They will find a home for your product, give a fair price, and some of them will even co-brand with you, such as the shelter model that we've seen developed by the AgroGreens team is we'll partner with you, we'll get your brand to market, and we'll make sure your product's on the shelves as long as you do what you're good at, which is the growing. So a lot of growers need to come in and understand that if they have a plan, if they have a schedule of what they're going to produce, and they have strong phenotypes that these groups can rotate in and out, these groups are more than happy to partner up long term because, again, solidifying the supply chain as we merge with CPG. We are going to see that bounce around, unique strain, one-time limited shelf drops, but consumers want to know when they go to store they can get lemon Skittles every time, and they want to know that it is going to be hand trimmed and it is going to be 25%. So that is something that I just say to all the micro growers is, you know what you have, you know that you're good at what you do, so just come and show those other groups that you can do that long term and sustain for them, and be ready to form those long-term partnerships because more groups are open to that than you would think.
Yeah, that's a great
And I
point.
like to comment about that. One thing I've noticed also is going back, it's always consistency. If your product is consistent and it's always looking good, it's always like at a good level, percentage level is really tight, there's not a lot of fluctuation, people will buy and buy again. It's been like I've seen a product like one of the LP I'm talking to has only one SKU, and he produces about 40,000 units per week. Product is always consistent. He's selling like crazy. Like it's just surreal what he's doing. And what's been happening is also the clientele gets educated about that consistency. So when someone gets a batch that maybe not as good, you'll see people in the social network saying, "Oh, you're maybe unlucky. You ended up with a not so good batch. Usually it's great." Like they're defending the brand, which is crazy. Like that's something that as a grower or like someone that's come to market, you should aim for. If people back your brand because that one time you had a bad batch, man, you're doing good. Like this is awesome.
So, Alexander, Shelly mentioned the OCS with the highlighting the craft segment. Is that something happening in Quebec as well, like, or you know, some kind of?
So in Quebec there's not a designation for it yet, but they do acknowledge to some degree the growers who are smaller, who have smaller batches. It's not communicated directly because of that law that I was talking about, but there are some ways for that grower or those type of micro groweries to be like present in social media and kind of stay out there like, hey, we're doing this really small batch product, that one pheno, like we have maybe 2 or 3 pheno rotating, but it's the same strain. It's going to be consistent. It's going to be there for you guys. And that's been more and more present. Like when I'm looking at Reddit, Facebook, like all of these social media, these groups that are there, you can tell that the LPs are there and the really small growers are pushing the vision that they have a small brand, or they have that mindset in place, and it really drives the market too. I'm seeing that like positivism. If you push too hard and your product is not good, yeah, that's not good. But if you push really hard but you have a really good product and you're pretty sure of what you have, the market will answer and will be very positive to that approach. Yeah.
I want to talk about pricing. Leaf, you can probably answer this. So what are the trends you're seeing in terms of pricing by product type?
Yeah,
B2B?
absolutely. Yeah, so if we start off in the flower category and segment it by potency, everything was getting compressed. Everything was dropping in price through third to fourth quarter of last year. But now we're seeing a rebounding. People are understanding the real quality that they can get at the market level for that 20% plus, 22 to 24, 24 and up, 27 and up. So we're seeing informal segmentation of potency. And then within that, it drives down into terpenes, trim method, cure method, bud size. So when we're talking pricing, that's where it's completely dropped out for the 15 to 20% category. There's just no buyers because of this arbitrary limit that a lot of the provinces have set. But within each of those categories, there's opportunities to be had. Within the 15 to 20 category, go do a fantastic pre-roll line. People don't need a 28% pre-roll in the summer, 19% pre-roll. You can go pick it up at $1.50 B2B right now, which we think is a absolutely underserved segment and opportunity for a lot of people. When we start coming into our 20% and the 24% categories, this really just comes down to consistency. This comes down to what does the bud look like. We're finally seeing that qualitative aspect take over, and this is where your $3 a gram and up ranges start to occur at the B2B level. And then we take a further step up into the 24 segment. This is where groups can start really branding around it to the legacy smoker, to the real hardcore, I use cannabis every day type of smoker, where a group knows it's going to be a little bit extra price paid for that quality. And this is where we started seeing step up into the 350 category, business to business and up per gram. And then the 27 to 32% that we're now seeing, these unreal phenotypes that people have spent years curating. And this is where the $4 to $4.35 per gram is kind of setting in. And the reason for that is that stuff does not stay on the shelves right now. And sometimes it does, but for the most part, people are launching these really high percentage SKUs at the higher price and they're willing to pay it. So this ties back to the discussion of micro growers knowing what they have, because there is just this premium that you can attach to it as the potency goes up, the way that the market's trending. So that's a high level commentary on the flower market. Now, when we dive into the edibles markets, we've seen the collapse of distillate and isolate. This is where you hope to see more innovation in the edible space, because people can go and pick up the inputs for a lot cheaper. People can go pick up distillate blended with MCT and start a gummy line for a lot cheaper. The gelatin and pectins are pennies on the dollar to actually carry the cannabinoid to the consumer. It's really about how does that distillate price come down. So we've seen gummies become more affordable. You can go pick up 10 milligrams of THC and 25 milligrams of CBD in one gummy, or sorry, in two gummies split, and it's $7. You can't match that in let's say a six pack, for example, picking that up for a Friday night. So really excited about what that's going to do for consumers as it flushes down the value chain. And the biggest thing that I'll say on prices is you have to be so active on it. It changes week over week, month over month. There is no one standard price. The numbers that I just set out today obviously are ranges, because they'll probably be different tomorrow. So no one hold my feet to the coals on those, but happy to chat anytime on that. And that's what we've done with our trending of prices, because they are so dynamic right now.
That's interesting. I want to get your thoughts, Leaf, again. Sorry, just a follow-up question. So in terms of determining prices, because it's obviously the cost of making the product, that's a factor. But how much does the premium, and like if it's sorry, when I guess when you're like a cannabis connoisseur, they know their product, they know what the good price, and they're not looking at just prices. But
Mhm.
for expanding the consumer base for the cannabis industry, are consumers just looking at pricing? Is like, or are other factors play into pricing a product that gets to the consumer?
Yeah, and again, this is the tough part because the provincial bodies are dictating what a SKU price should be set at with the producers, and they're setting the margins in there. So it's tough because the price on some of these products is being set before it's even gotten to the consumer. So all of groups are saying, that's a fantastic ice cream cake. I wish I could pay more, but my hands are tied by the SKU. And over time, once the sales data come in, they're like, okay, this is selling out month over month. Maybe I can play with the price a little. So it's almost that chicken and the egg where the price is being set before it reaches the consumer. One blessing in disguise I will say about bud tenders, though, is people aren't watching those TV screens on the bud view boards as deeply as they are about talking with the bud tender. So I'd say that's a saving grace because that's where quality charged at a higher price isn't scaring people away. They're saying, oh, you got a powdered donuts in and it's 30%. Wow, I've never tried that. It sounds awesome. And then they'll buy it and the bud tender might say, oh, it's 42 bucks instead of your usual $34 order. They're like, you know what? You talked me into, like, we've been talking about the strain so much, I just want to try it. So that's one saving grace, I'd say, is that having that bud tender and that expertise in there when it comes to pricing the product that isn't completely scaring consumers away as much as it is when you're shopping off the shelf at Walmart for a mirror or something, right? It's expertise and it's talking about the product that really helps sell through at the premium price. So that allows some of these groups that flexibility.
Right.
Yeah, and to add to that,
Yeah.
one thing I wanted to say is I don't know if it's like that for other provinces. Leaf and Shelly will probably know better than me, but there was like when I'm looking back at 2020 and 2019, it was full of Kush, like pink Kush, purple Kush, everything Kush. Okay, that was the trend. And then what I'm seeing was more like cookies, like Girl Scout cookies, all these cookie trends.
Yeah.
But you're seeing like for these new products that are coming that are kind of outside of those trend, like strain trends, they can get away sometimes with pricing a bit more because they're that unique strain that no one is competing against, and then it's kind of playing with that ball field, right? It's always that game that's going on. That's what I've noticed on my side, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, if three groups go to the market with mimosa and this consumer standing there saying, okay, well, what's the cheapest mimosa? Like they sound
Yeah,
the exact
exactly.
same to me. Just give me the cheapest mimosa. So yeah, absolutely. In those cases, consumers are going to be wary of the price. But if you come out with something that just they have never even heard of because there's so many phenotypes now, that is going to just ping on their mind. So yeah, absolutely. It's a great point.
Shelly, I want to ask you. So from where you're sitting, and you mentioned, sustainability and that is, as a trend that's coming up. Could you talk about some of the other most significant trends that you're seeing, and what it means for the cannabis industry?
Sure. Yeah, I think, we all read the news, hear the news, see the news. I think consolidation in the industry is a big trend that is fast and furious, and I don't see that going away. And I think it's really interesting with the M&A activity around international and global expansion. So that's also really seems to be gathering momentum. We saw the introduction last year with the value brands, and with that introduction, and it eliminated like the 1 gram pretty much completely. And so I think that's another trend we're seeing, and we've just been talking about these premium brands, and so I feel like consumer segmentation and really data-driven insights that help to improve the value and create a more premium variety. We're also seeing a lot of expansion in the retail network. So lots of licensing that's happening here in Ontario, the largest province. And so I feel that network of retail and that expansion is a significant trend. And then, you know, we also read and hear about the right sizing that's going on with organizations and the significant amount of costs that still need to be eliminated. So people, jobs, facilities, I think that right sizing is also a trend. But I think, you know, if I think about what are some of the core or key impacts or outcomes these trends are going to have from a consumer, I think they're going to benefit from the variety. And as we've already talked about, the evolution of the industry and getting more into health and wellness versus just the traditional ways of consuming the product. I think for licensed producers, there's this path to profitability. And so I feel like that's a positive trend and that will really have a significant impact on the industry. And then from retail, we've seen a lot of emergence in online commerce, but as we've just been talking about, the importance of that bud tender and how they're creating that in-store experience and really helping with the education and the information that consumers are looking for beyond what's limited that you get on that product. And then just, you know, everything looks the same. So how do I really know what I'm getting? And more importantly, what should I anticipate that the impact is going to be me, that I'm going to get when I consume that. So that's what I see and hear. And
Right. I'm wondering, Leaf, what trends are you looking at when you're you know, analyzing the data of the you know, that you're getting from the exchange? Are you also, you know, are you looking at trends as well, or whatever's happening outside of the exchange that sort of influences the analysis or the insights that you're giving to?
Yeah, so everything on the exchange ties down to the consumer level. My buyers won't pick up a product unless they know that their SKU is going to get approved, they know their margin on it, and they know that the consumer is going to buy it off the shelf. So everything ripples out. The biggest thing about our data that we have in-house is just price and pricing behavior and time to buy. So when I was meaning those prices are being compressed, but now we're seeing a rebound in some of those craft segmentations. That really analyzes into the behavior of these LPs, showing what the next frontier of the battle for market share is going to be in. And as Shelly said, it's brands. So a lot of these groups who can supply their own value chain and keep driving costs down. Some other groups on their own who have to go to the B2B market can't compete on that. So they're going to compete on the quality or the uniqueness of their product. So when we look at what the pricing ripples out into, it's what's going to be the competition. What does this R&D allow groups to go and innovate? And as Shelly said, the medical side too, it's always been a microcosm compared to the rec side. But I know for myself, I have CBD oil in my medicine cabinet and I have it in my backpack, and it's something that I think is going to become more popular, again, because the pricing of hemp is coming down, meaning the price for CBD distillate is coming down, meaning it can be blended with an MCT. So what we're really trying to do at the exchange is take our pricing and our purchasing behaviors and then connect that downstream with other groups to say, what does this mean for the consumer? So that's the biggest thing we're trying to do right now is what does the pricing ripple out into?
So I want to expand that question, I guess. Could you talk about some of the buying habits of producers for new SKUs and the approval by the provinces of these products?
Yeah, again, so craft designation, for example, that has driven groups to come say, I need anything micro that you have. They're strain agnostic, they're sometimes potency agnostic. So new designations, a new way for consumers to get in there and compete. New strains, everyone needs something unique. They need an edge on the market. And something I'd say that actually didn't exist but now exists is groups are more willing to do limited time drops because of that brand being set into the market. People understand what that brand does. That brand can get their consumer base excited with limited time drops. So we've actually seen an emergence of one-time purchasing. Groups willing to pick up a strain and know that they don't need it again because of the evolution of brands. So those are the kind of three high levels. Obviously, a deeper dive would be needed in each, but it's come down to how do I get ahead of the competition? Is it going to be through the unique strain? Is it going to be through a limited time drop to promote my brand and get people more excited and get a consumer to the store every 6 days instead of every 14 days? And then again, back to how do I guarantee some of my supply chain for my core strains? If this is my best seller that people know me for, how do I guarantee that that is always going to show up? So those three pillars is kind of what I would focus on for purchasing habits. And lastly, how a person buys the product, how they engage with it, is how much information a grower is willing to present. That ties back to the images, the inside of your grow room, the grow style, the ongoing grow plans. So transparency from the micro growers really helps. If I hold two products against one another, one just has its THC, the other one has images, video, bud density, all of that. This one's just going to be so much more appealing to the purchaser straight on the basis of what information was given to them.
Right. Content is king, eh?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, we're talking
Um,
about data. You need data to make the decision, right?
right, right. Alexandre, you probably mentioned some of the things, but are there other factors that you're seeing that are affecting how consumers are responding to specific products?
Yeah, good question. So like there's always packaging going back to Shelly. Most of it is the first impression, right? Like they walk, they're looking at the new SKU online, they're just being interested. So what's being shown on the packaging, how much information is there? Definitely very valuable. The more information you can get away with adding onto that label, I think the best decision it is for you. I do know that from talking with some LPs, there's sometimes some pushback because they're like, oh, my terpenes levels aren't as high as other products, so why should I put this on the packaging? And right now in Quebec, at least, the number of SKUs with terpene percentage is next to nothing. Like it's a very new concept. So I think you can showing that to the consumer won't hurt your because you're not competing against tons of SKUs that are adding those type of information. You're just benefiting. It's going back to what Leaf was saying, educating the customer, having a little bit plus side to compare to the other products. Because again, if there's three mimosa coming out, well, if one of them has the terpenes, as the cultivation date, the curing time, like there's all of that information. Like what I've seen in my metrics is that sells a lot more, and it doesn't stay on the shelf that long when you have those extra components with your packaging. There are some clever ways with the pre-roll. What I've seen is some LPs associating with certain rolling products. So the paper is like a raw paper or something like that. That makes it a bit more interesting for the client. Okay, they're using more of a premium way of wrapping their pre-roll. That also helps. And just the communication overall, like having that little, it's building your brand, right? You don't want to be bland. Like it's just bringing everything to the table. Like what I'm loving about certain products is just the usage of colors can be very, like it doesn't really change the fact that the flower is good or not, but it just at least speaks like the interest of people who are looking at it. And when they like it, they'll come back for it. You can see that cycle being triggered. And yeah, it's definitely a trend like that I've seen. And the type of packaging going back, people are more geared toward the bags or the tuna cans or like those very specific. I've seen glass containers. I would say it depends. It's a hit or miss. I probably imagine the cost is much higher, so I don't know if it's worth it or not. But it's something to keep in mind. Other than that, for my side, I don't have the luxury of working with edibles or with vapes, so I don't get to see those type of brands being. But like we said at the beginning, the most of the sales come from the dry flower, or like it's mostly all from there. Like I think people are sticking to that. I'm a bit personally disappointed that the 1 gram is going away because I was a fan of those to try it, but I understand why it's fading, and there's like 4 SKUs at the SQDC for 1 gram. There's not that many left. But most of them turn around and did pre-roll for like 0.3 gram or like things like that to kind of roll with that. So yeah.
Right. So we're nearing the end of our panel discussion. Very interesting discussion indeed. But I want to take a time to go around the table and just give everyone a chance to just talk about some of the key takeaways, some message you want to impart to our audience. Let's start with you, Shelly, and then Leaf, and then Alexandre.
Sure. Well, I think thanks. It's been a really fun session today. I've enjoyed being on it. And I think, the key takeaways is just understanding, like from my perspective, it's more label and packaging, and it's really understanding the metadata that's behind all of that and how you can draw the best solutions, conclusions, alternatives, harmonize across your brand portfolio and make that work from a consumer perspective, but also balancing the cost of goods and the route to market.
Right. Leaf?
Yeah, I'll just take on the data side of a lot of people found holding data close to their chest. They thought that they had the proprietary secret formula. What I'll say is that's something we've seen to not be true in this industry. Sharing that data, talking to groups, and then getting their data in return. This is a much more friendly industry than you think, and everyone has data to share that you don't have, and you have data that they don't have. So marrying the data, making use of the data, that would be my biggest point, because there's so much that the governments and the regulations do to segment this industry. We have an opportunity to really bring that data together and then draw meaningful or more meaningful insights out of that. And that's the biggest thing that we do in our job, call people all day, every day, just to see where things are at and evolving with. So happy to have those discussions anytime with groups, but that's the biggest thing. Be open, be talkative, and it'll benefit you a lot more with your data and knowing what it means in the context of the industry.
And Alexandre?
Yes. Well, thanks for having me, and it was great discussion with all of you. Just wanted to leave you all with a bit of wisdom that I think it's now that the industry is three years into the legalization, it's important to not just throw things at the wall and hope that they sticks. I think people should be a bit more clever than that and investigate. And we have like all of us around the table have a large amount of data that is very useful from the very beginning of your project to the very end of the project where you take it to the shelves. So yeah, I'd be honored if anyone has questions regarding the Quebec segment, or if any of you around the panel want to discuss and share that data. I'd be more than happy to have those deeper discussions.
Sounds great. And with that, that's all the time we have for discussions today. Thanks again to our panelists, Shelly, Leaf, and Alexandre, for sharing your insights and expertise in today's discussions. And thank you to all the attendees for joining us. For more information about upcoming webinars and to check the latest news and developments in the cannabis industry, just visit growopportunity.ca. Have a good day and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank
Have
you.
a good one.
Bye.